This is how I'm training my creative eye to develop taste and build a better fashion brand. My name is Chris Drago. I'm a creative director, fashion designer, and brand owner. This is my brand here, Pathos of Things. I design all the pieces. I creative direct the photo shoots. I even model the clothes. Here's a few photos of me modeling the clothes that I designed. Design the products in Clo 3D for custom cut and sew patterns. In every collection I do, I drop a lookbook with really awesome art directed photos. I'm about 5 years into this process. I have a long way to go. I have ambitions of really building up this fashion brand and becoming a big deal creative director, either by paving my own path and building a legacy with my own brand or eventually working for a much bigger brand. I have several strategies and drills that I do related to building visual literacy, which is really just a fancy way of saying that's how to build taste or develop an eye. I think developing personal taste and a unique style is going to be really, really important moving into 2026, especially with all of the AI creative directing going on. And it's also never been easier to start a clothing brand. So I think having really amazing art directed content and a unique visual style will be a differentiator for brands like mine. I broke up this visual literacy system, or this way that I'm developing taste and an eye, into 4 subsections. So we have semiotics, which I'll explain. If you've never heard that word before, do not worry. Do not click off this video. I'm going to explain everything. I study subcultures and become completely fluent in the scene and the uniforms related to that scene. I study fashion and music history. Some of you might not know, but I actually graduated from Berklee College of Music. I have a music business degree. I have lots of connections in the music industry, and the majority of people really championing my brand right now are touring musicians in bands for big artists, or they're producers and they work with big artists. So studying music history as it pertains to fashion history is really important to me personally. And then I have archive research. So this is just putting together a database of media, photos, videos, and more. I'll show you my Obsidian database towards the end of this video, so stick around for that. It's basically a place where I organize everything. I also take all of my notes there. It's really kind of like Notion, but on steroids, but also more simple at the same time. It's a cool app, you'll see. So let's go back here to this big word, semiotics. What the hell does that mean? Well, semiotics is the communication of meaning. Everything signals some kind of meaning when it pertains to fashion. Every garment on this model here is saying something. It's trying to display some kind of meaning. Clothes, casting, like the models, the set where the models are shot, the type of clothes or the vibe of the shoot, the soundtrack that's used, and even really, really specific details like hemlines on a garment signal stuff inside specific cultures. And there's a drill that I do that helps me understand all of the stuff that's being signaled, whether I pick up on it right away or not. And this is what I'm calling the Decode Recode drill. And bear with me, stay with me, because I'm going to break it down and I'm also going to show you how I use AI to help me with this. So I pick one runway look or one image from a campaign for a brand that I respect. In this case, this is an image from Balenciaga's Spring 2026 collection. I take this image and then I list the denotation, which means what's literally here. A dad hat, a Britney Spears t-shirt, a big leather bag that looks like an IKEA bag, pants tucked into intense, sleek leather designer boots. That's the denotation. That's what's literally there. After I list that, I then need to understand the connotation, or what these things signal. This dad hat signals something specific. This big leather IKEA looking bag signals something specific. So let's kind of dive deeper into that and explain that. So I used this prompt with GPT-5. I have a custom style prompt that I use, which changes the output. So it might not look similar to how your ChatGPT talks, but that's okay. This prompt will kind of get you to the same destination regardless of what system prompts you use. And if you don't know what a system prompt is, then don't worry about it. You can just copy and paste this into your ChatGPT and just run with it from there. So I said, again, to GPT-5, let's practice semiotics by breaking down an image from Balenciaga's Spring 2026 campaign. And then I listed the denotation that I picked up on. I can easily identify oversized silhouettes. So we have these oversized cargo pants, this oversized bag, this oversized t-shirt, a dad hat, an oversized blue leather bag, Britney Spears logo and photo on a t-shirt, oversized cargo pants tucked into leather boots. So most people can put together the denotation. It's pretty obvious. It's just what is blatantly here on the screen. But then the important part of this prompt is when I said, I need help identifying the connotation. What does it signal? GPT-5 with thinking on, GPT-5 thinking mode. You have to click thinking mode. It thought for 29 seconds and then said, here's the read sign by sign. Big picture first. Core connotation. Luxury thrift meets post Y2K celebrity culture. It signals status anonymity, class blur, and a knowingly trash to treasure aesthetic. Expensive objects styled like thrift finds to comment on fame, fandom, and consumption. What the signs are saying: gigantic silhouette, power through volume. So more fabric, taking up more space. So the body literally appears like it's taking up more space, like it's bigger. Anti-fit, things styled how you might not expect them to be styled on purpose. Like utilitarian cargo pants tucked into designer leather boots. It says, I opt out of conventional polish while still broadcasting budget, saying I'm a little bit different, but I'm not too different. Even subconsciously, if you see this person on the street, something about this says expensive or exclusive. Like it's familiar, but this big leather bag has to cost thousands of dollars. Even if you don't know the price, you probably just assume that. Next, Britney T. Pop nostalgia plus tabloid trauma. Reads fandom, like this person's a fan of Britney. Parasocial culture. Parasocial relationships are when people feel like they're connected to a certain celebrity just because they consume a lot of their media, and they end up developing this weird relationship in their head when in reality, no relationship exists and the celebrity has no idea who this person is. Pink script pushes teen idol energy against a hard adult boot. I see a lot of designers use this aspect of juxtaposition, right? Having something that's one style and then contrasting it with a style that's almost like the polar opposite, right? But somehow they make it work. But the secret is that it doesn't just somehow work. It's not magic. It's just that all of these things are so unique to Balenciaga and so unique to Dimna's vision that even though they juxtapose, it still falls within the code, right? The DNA of the brand. Dad hat signals off duty, errand run, airport life, anti-celebrity posture. It's a low status uniform piece, typically associated with cheap fast fashion, but put out by a designer brand and they slapped a hefty price tag on it, which then flips the script on the dad hat. It's no longer this low status uniform piece. If you're wearing a Balenciaga dad hat, it's very expensive, and if anything, you're high status, but without signaling high status. unless people are in the know and they recognize the logo on the hat, and then they might say like, oh, that's actually probably an expensive piece. But to your regular person, they're probably not going to know. Electric blue mega bag, IKEA coated, but in leather. Translates like, we turned the cheap utilitarian tote bag from IKEA into a luxury flex. That's kind of hard, not gonna lie. Comments on consumption. Also has nomad energy, like all my stuff is on me right now. Which, yeah, it also could tie into the airport style. This looks like it could be an airport fit, minus the boots. But I don't know, if you're decked out in all Balenciaga and you're pulling up to like the Delta Sky Lounge or, some other private membership in the airport terminal, yeah, maybe you are rocking these kinds of boots. Some people take their airport fits really seriously. So this is a really cool designer airport fit, in my opinion. Still looks like it's comfy. It's signaling status while staying low key. Let's keep going. Patchwork cargo with tech yoke. Military and outdoor codes mashed up. Function cosplay more than function. So it's cosplaying as functional. But in reality, the purpose here isn't function. People aren't putting on their Balenciaga cargo pants to do any kind of outdoor work. It's especially not being used in the military. Tucked in sharp leather boots. So we've mentioned this a couple times. ChatGPT here says authority kink, cowboy, cavalry, bouncer. Keeps the volume in check while asserting control. Adds menace to otherwise slouchy look. So that line is really the only one here that kind of resonated with me. Cowboy, cavalry, bouncer. Yeah, those all kind of seem like random words. But yeah, adds menace to an otherwise slouchy look. It just adds this element of intensity. And also, it's kind of making a pretty blatant statement here. Like, my pants are not for utility and neither are my boots. And I wear them in a style that is counterintuitive to the typical utility of these types of clothes. Again, anti-fit, right? It's an anti-fit. Chain, necklace, accessory, street adjacent, glint. Cheap to precious ambiguity. Like, yeah, you can't tell if it's a cheap necklace or an expensive necklace. For the color story, we have grays and fatigues with one synthetic jolt of blue. I like that, how that's described. Synthetic jolt of blue. So it creates a shocking contrast. And it's shot against a studio white cyclorama background. It's ecom sterile. I like that. Treats the look like an SKU. Flattens fashion fantasy into product, which is the joke. Okay, I don't usually trust ChatGPT when it's talking about jokes. Obviously, the chatbot doesn't have a sense of humor. It's just replicating what sense of humor it thinks Balenciaga's trying to pull off. But I do kind of understand what it's saying to a certain extent. Yeah, it's all about the fit. Like, the point in shooting this in a white cyclorama is to make it all about the fit and display the semiotics of the fit, the meaning of the fit, not necessarily the meaning of the background or the location. It kind of leaves the location up to interpretation and allows the customer to imagine the location that they would be in when they wear these clothes, which could be different for everybody. But I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that, Balenciaga or my brand or any other brand should only do these studio white ecom style shots. In fact, Balenciaga also does other lifestyle shots with different locations, different scenes, and all of their fashion shows have specifically art directed scenes that are oftentimes outdoors. But for the spring 2026 collection on the website, the brand decided to display all of the looks in this ecom style. Now I want to kind of talk about semiotics as they relate to my own brand, or the symbols and their meaning that I've used for my own brand. Specifically, I want to talk about this. So this is from 2022. In 2022, I experimented with these Y2K style stars, which were really big during the pandemic. So in retrospect, I was already late on this. If I wanted to really like dial in the Y2K aesthetic, it needed to be in like 2020. Anyway, I mixed those stars with the racing aesthetic. So I was doing like the racing flag on this vest. And I don't really know why I did that. I think I thought it looked cool at the time. I really had an underdeveloped eye. And I ended up abandoning this idea almost immediately. I think that the puffer idea was cool. Like the product itself was in line with my vision and my aesthetic I was building and my unique identity I was building. But I was doing too much with it. Like I have this custom emblem here, which I had already been using for my brand. And then I added these like random Y2K stars, which is trying to leverage like a completely different aesthetic and try to pull in fans from that aesthetic. And then I had like this free font from Canva and it was in italic and bold. And then I had like a different free font from Canva that wasn't italic. And then below that, I had the racing flags. So there's just like a lot of symbols here that are just not communicating my message properly. It created a mess. And if you're new to studying semiotics or symbols and their meaning and these different aesthetics, you might not have noticed that either. And if you're running a brand, you might need to go and do a little audit of your logo and your aesthetics and make sure that you aren't borrowing from too many different scenes, aesthetics, niches, whatever, right? Like you really want to dial it in and keep it tight so it's unique to you. This I thought was unique to me because I just added a bunch of random aesthetics, but adding a bunch of random aesthetics does not make you unique. If anything, it just makes you look amateur. All right, so moving on from there, that's semiotics. Communication of meaning, understanding symbols, understanding how products translate to an audience, how they're interpreted by an audience. Now let's talk about subcultures and developing a fluency for understanding subcultures. So you can explain, you will be fluent and completely understand a subculture when you're able to name the code of a scene. If you don't know what that means, just bear with me. I will explain code and I'll explain scene. You need to predict the uniform that fans and artists that make music related to that scene wear. And you need to translate the code into a sellable product without killing the myth. So that's just the overview. What's a code? What's a scene? What's a uniform? What's the myth? Let's break all those down. Starting with a scene. What's a scene? You might have heard this before. The Warped Tour scene. The emo band scene. The indie rock scene. Right? A scene is a group of people who share music interests, places that they like to hang out, and a specific look. Skate park kids, techno kids, indie kids, emo kids. These are all different scenes. Each scene has patterns that repeat called rituals, which I'll get to in a second. But before that, what's a code, right? We need to be able to name the code of a scene. Well, a code is another word for the rules of the look that tell insiders of that scene, this is what makes us. If you look like this, talk like this, act like this, go to these places, consume these types of music, you're one of us. That's the code. I'm sure if you scroll through TikTok, you've heard phrases like, she's so girlfriend coded. That person goes out of her way to be a good partner in her relationship. Or you might hear someone say, that's so Virgil coded, meaning someone really follows the blueprint of Virgil Abloh to the point where their art looks like Virgil's art. That's what being Virgil coded means. So now we know the code and we know the scene. And there's a 3-layer model that I use. This used to be a 4-layer model, but I made it a little easier to understand. There's a 3-layer model for being able to decode a scene or name the code of a scene. We have the myth, which is the story believers in that scene tell themselves. For example, the myth amongst fans of punk is that when you are a fan of punk, you are anti-institution. You're all about freedom, anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-cultural norms. That's the myth. Remember here I said you need to be able to translate the code into sellable product without killing the myth. What does that mean? Let's say you want to make clothes inspired by punk. Then you need to make a product that fits within the myth of punk. Your product needs to represent anti-institution, anti-establishment. If your product does not represent the myth, then you will come off as corny. People will think you're inauthentic. People will think that you don't represent the values of the scene, and you don't ultimately know the code of the scene. If you don't know the code of the scene, you'll be rejected from that scene. And there's nothing worse than trying to do something that's within a specific aesthetic, thinking that you're a part of that, and then ultimately getting rejected by the people that you thought were your own homies because you poorly represent the way that they are, the places they go, the music they like to listen to, and the clothes they like to wear by putting out a product that kills the myth. You can say you are punk and anti-establishment and anti-institution and then make fast fashion that looks like Zara. The fans of punk are not going to accept you because that kills the myth. Next, there are rituals. How the scene meets. When I was working with underground rappers in LA and giving them clothes, and they're wearing the clothes on stage at festivals like Rolling Loud, I did a lot of my networking in one of two places, either at warehouse events or the club. The club was where people would go in the beginning of the evening. You'd spend the majority of your night there. People would connect. They're playing loud music. People are drinking, smoking in the club. It's lit. And then after that, people go to what's called an afters or after hours. Because bars and clubs in LA close at 2. And then the after hours parties, usually at some warehouse down the street, goes all night until like 8 in the morning. So that's the ritual of that scene I was in, this underground LA hip hop scene. There are lots of after hours companies. Shout out Trap Rave, shout out Elevate Angel, which ended up kind of becoming Trap Rave, Lick and Dip, Underwear. There are so many of these afters companies, right? And each one has their own specific scene. At Trap Rave, you're going to see a lot of kids wearing elevated basics, streetwear staples paired with some kind of jewelry, or they'll save up some money and then flex on like a pair of Rick Owens or a jacket from some designer brand. All the techno and house music raves at big warehouses, they have their own look. It's a lot more utilitarian wear. It's a lot more tech wear. A lot of Christian metalcore bands would practice in their church basement. That was their ritual. That's where their scene met. And oftentimes, if people meet at the club, they'll get a private table at the club. And it's like, oh yeah, we get the same table in the back every time. Like, that's where my crew hangs out. That's where the scene lives. And then during these rituals, members of the scene wear their uniform, their specific style of fashion. Certain styles of fashion have specific silhouettes. Indie rock music has a way tighter silhouette. They wear more skinny jeans. They wear Converse. Hip hop R&B, I see way more baggier clothes. And these aren't by accident, and they're not stereotypes. As I'll get into more later in this video and in future videos, like the tempo of music and the vibe of music affects the way you dance, and the way you dance actually affects the type of clothing that feels comfortable while you're dancing to that music. It's all tied in. Nothing's random. The way that I get a full picture of how the scene lives is not by going on Instagram and stalking all these scenes, all these events, all these companies, all these people on Instagram. It's good to follow them on Instagram too, but you really need to go where the scene lives. I've gone to so many after hours warehouse parties. I've been to so many Friday night events at the club in Hollywood. If you scroll through my Instagram, you'll see several years ago, the scene for me was live music. I post a lot of clips and photos of me at concerts. Here's me on stage at Academy in LA. I think I have a couple different shots of this. So every time I'm at one of these events, I get invited to something or I buy a ticket to something. Here I was backstage, one of my homies was performing, and this is a clip of the band Volumes. They were opening up for the band Issues. I was on the stage. For me, this is where the scene was alive and breathing. Going here and putting myself in that position connected me with people that pioneer the scene. And that, going to these places and being active in these communities and meeting the people and absorbing the culture is ultimately how you become fluent. And while I was putting this together, I realized that the common denominator for all these things, at least specifically in my life, is music. Music is the accelerant for becoming fluent in all these different subcultures. Artists rep the scene's code in photos, videos, and on stage, what they wear on stage. When the artist scales, meaning like they blow up, right? Or they become really popular, or they start going on a bunch of tours, or they put out a bunch of music videos. When the media related to that artist and the brand around that artist scales, the fan uniform scales too. And then ultimately gets adopted by bigger brands and designer brands. So people that were really into punk, but still wanted to get involved with some kind of designer brand, wear designer clothes, they went to Vivienne Westwood. People in the rave scene that want designer clothes upgrade to techwear, like Acronym, for example, or Arc'teryx. Fans of indie rock that got into designer fashion found Eddie Slimane. Eddie Slimane basically immortalized the skinny jean. He made it cool forever. It might go in and out of popularity, but the skinny jean will always be a staple of fashion, and specifically rock music fashion. And fans of Y2K pop that want designer clothes love Balenciaga. Balenciaga is all about that celebrity style merchandise and paparazzi fits, but made oversized and really expensive in luxury. I personally am a nerd and I like to study fashion and music history. When I was at Berkeley, I took a class all about the life and death of Miles Davis. Changed my life. A few years ago, Virgil Abloh mentioned that Playboi Carti is kind of like the reincarnation or this new embodiment of Miles Davis, which is so interesting to me because even though the music couldn't be more different, like you would never put Playboi Carti and Miles Davis like in the same Spotify playlist, for example, but their aura and their story and the way that they carry themselves is so similar. And Playboi Carti is, in many people's eyes, a fashion icon. Whether that's from his own style or the style of Sex is Death, his stylist. Studying Playboi Carti's style and his relationship with these big designer brands led me to understand the uniform related to the opium aesthetic. If you're unfamiliar with opium, it's Playboi Carti's label. Ken Carson and Destroy Lonely are two very big artists that are also signed to this label. And over time, they've really established this aesthetic, this visual style that's very dark, very inspired by Western European aesthetics. Everything's black, bats, drugs. It has this punk, almost evil vibe to it, right? Fans that are into the opium aesthetic that want to upgrade to designer fashion from their maybe fast fashion styles, and maybe they get really into Rick Owens. So people that love opium aesthetic love Rick Owens. As you can see, it's very dark, it's avant-garde, it's mysterious. So it shares a lot of the same code as the opium scene. Every music scene invents a uniform. A great way to study this is by looking up trends by decade. If you can understand the past, it'll help you understand the present, which will help you make better decisions for the future. Every music or art history class I've ever taken in high school and college dedicated several weeks of the semester to studying trends by decade. It's foolproof. It's a very quick way to level up your visual literacy. And also, in this document, I added some specific examples with photos like 50s rockabilly, which was big in the South and the US, greasers, cuff denim, white tees, pomade in the hair. In the 1960s in the UK, there was mod style and there was soul. The Beatles kind of mixed the mod style and the soul style together. And then in the 70s, you had the contrast between punk and disco. So you start seeing all these iconic punk bands pop up like the Sex Pistols. But you also had Saturday Night Fever style disco from the late 1970s. It's funny, the punk signaled anti-system, anti-establishment. Disco signaled nightlife glamour, but there were two poles of hedonism. Lots of drugs, lots of sex, but just represented with different code or styles. And the next thing that I'm doing to get better at being a creative director, develop taste, develop an eye, is I put together an archive and I research it and I study it. There are lots of places you can pull media from for your archive. I reference other archives that are out there. The house archive for Balenciaga, for example. Balenciaga puts all of the seasonal collections on the site. If you press this explore button here and then just go to collections, all collections, this is an incredible archive of all the looks from all of the collections over the last 9 years since Dimna was the creative director. There are also industry archives. You can go to vintage dealers, like actual physical vintage locations that sell vintage clothes. I like to get swatches and of fabric from my garment manufacturer, so the factory where my garments are made. They send me swatches and I add those swatches to my archive. Trim libraries are great. If you don't know what trims are, it's like all of the embellishments, details, like zippers and buttons that get added to a garment. Trade magazines for trade shows, and military and workwear manuals. Military and workwear manuals are great if you are trying to do a designer version of, let's say, like a combat boot. Like Yeezy did the season 4 combat boots. I own a pair of those. I also own a regular Rothko military style boot. And they're very different. They look similar in the silhouette. The aesthetic is similar. But it seems obvious to me that the team at Yeezy referenced real military and workwear manuals and then use those as references to create luxury designer versions of basic military garments or combat boots, shoes. Next, cultural archives. So magazines, films, news, photos, retail catalogs. I also would consider like bookmarks on social media. I love to bookmark posts on X and on Instagram of different campaigns that inspire me or art direction that inspires me. I also like to bookmark ads. I think ads are cultural pieces of media as well. And also, I think there's some underrated cultural archives like Vogue Runway. So Vogue has its magazine, it has its e-magazine, it has its website, but then there's also a subsection of Vogue called Vogue Runway where they just document photos of all the looks from runway shows for all the major designer brands. And then when I collect all of this media, I put it in my personal archive. For example, this is Obsidian. Obsidian is where I keep all of my notes and my media related to things I do, people I meet, stuff I study. So this is from almost exactly a year ago. I did this image study of this cover story featuring Lil Yachty and James Blake. I put 2 images here. I took notes about the team. I took notes about the creative direction and the color theory and the brand identity. I added my key takeaways. And then in Obsidian, I also have this sidebar that I can collapse, and I embed AI tools like ChatGPT directly into this. So if I wanted to talk about this magazine cover, I could even drag this image into ChatGPT or take a screenshot of it and then talk about it with custom GPT that's specific for creative directing. So that's actually basically 100x the speed at which I get better at analyzing these campaigns, understanding why certain campaigns work so well, and it's really developing my eye so I can understand what it really takes to be like a pro creative director working on a campaign for high profile artists like these two for such a prolific magazine like Complex. In Obsidian, I have all of these individual notes, and it's rendering the colors right now, but these are color coded, and I'll do a little time lapse here. So I filter all of these nodes here, and each dot that you see represents a different workspace, and it contains all of its own notes, all of its own media, and then I use metadata to link all the notes together. So this is season 2 workspace. I actually have this open. This is where I do all my work or I did all my work for the most recent Pathos of Things drop. I was calling it season 2. I ended up releasing it as P2, but the season 2 workspace here is connected to hundreds of other notes in my Obsidian database or in my archive. So that's how Obsidian works. That's how I keep track of all my notes, how I keep track of everything I'm working on, how I keep track of all the media that I've consumed. I put my mood boards in here, and it's just a really amazing way for me to keep everything organized, and it also acts as a workspace where I can collaborate with an AI and take notes, watch videos, take notes on it, etc. There's so much you could do with this. But yeah, that's my personal archive. Hopefully that gave you an idea of how you can set up your own personal archive. But I want to make it clear, you can look up pretty much all of these things on the internet. At this point, none of this stuff is really gate kept anymore, right? And if you have $10, $20 to spend a month, you can get a Vogue Runway subscription. You can access some of these paywalled archives for pretty cheap, but really with ChatGPT, and if you enable the web search feature in ChatGPT, you can have it look up pretty much anything for you as long as you know what to ask for. So if you're like, I'm looking for these specific images from this campaign for Balenciaga from 2019 so I can understand the brand's DNA, it will then just go and look up on the internet those images and find those images for you, which saves a lot of time. But yeah, this is basically how I'm developing taste, how I'm developing an eye. I'm calling it visual literacy. It's kind of a fancy way of just saying understanding meaning of symbols, understanding subcultures, becoming fluent in them, understanding fashion and music history, and putting together my own personal archive of media. I think if I can continue to do these things, I will eventually reach my goal of becoming a prolific creative director, whether that's for my own brand or for another brand. This is just part 1 of 4 in these videos I plan on making about my plan and my approach to creative directing. Lots more awesome content on the way. People have been asking for videos about how to use AI to create mockups and create visual concepts like they've seen me do in some of my other videos. So I'll definitely be making more content like that. If that's something you're looking forward to seeing, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon so you're notified every time I post. Seriously, it's so important for the algorithm, and it's really special for me when I see that. It really helps me out a lot as a small creator. If you want access to my notes and my whiteboards like the one you saw in this video, hit up the free Fashion Brand Vault Skool group, link in the description. We're officially at 705 members. It's growing super fast. I'd love to see you on there. Come join the party. Tell me about your brand. Let's discuss your project, and I'll see you in the next one.